breaking news. Reform UK's chairman resigns after calling the parliamentary question of another of his MPs dumb. Zia Youssef says that working to get the party elected is no longer a good use of my time. We'll bring you the latest. A warning to the UK from Moscow as the Russian ambassador tells Sky News he believes the UK was involved in the devastating Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia. The 5% Club, the US ramps up the pressure on NATO members with calls for a huge additional increase in defence spending. Also tonight, the Shadow Chancellor vows to regain trust in the Conservatives after Liz Truss's mini-budget, triggering a spat with the former Prime Minister. The government pledges 500,000 more children will get free school meals, even as the Education Department is set for cuts in next week's spending review. I'll speak to the Education Minister. And Gordon Brown praises Marcus Rashford for his work campaigning for free school meals. We look at whether celebrity endorsement for a political cause is worth its weight in gold. Our very own star power for the evening will be Caroline Flint and Daisy Mcandrew, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Now, we start with some breaking news tonight because Reform UK's chairman has dramatically quit his role, saying that working to get the party elected is no longer a good use, apparently, of his time. Well, our political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh, is here. Serena, for those people who haven't heard Zia Youssef, I just want to kind of get across how surprised I was by this, because as far as I knew, he was like best buds with Nigel Farage, like key figure in the party. What's happened?
Yeah, I mean, he was a key figure in the party. I mean, it's quite a small party, so if you're in the core team, you're really, really inside the fold. I mean, he's an unelected politician, of course, but he's the party chairman, and the way the party is structured means that financially he's also invested as well. He's a millionaire, he's been a previous donor. Nigel Farage has stood on platform and stages with him earlier this year. They're very close, and actually in his resignation follow-up, Nigel Farage to Zia Youssef, he says Youssef has been a huge factor in their success at the local elections. So there is warmth between them, and that's why it's so shocking, but potentially not surprising, although ironic. Zia Youssef was the man who was meant to bring credibility to reform. He was brought in, as they say, to professionalise the party. In the general elections, they were bruised heavily by controversial comments from prospective candidates, lots of controversy around the party historically, as well as in the general election. And Zia Youssef was meant to be the man to come in and professionalise it. Instead, now he's part of the chaos, having resigned in this shocking way and unexplained, although one of the reasons we think was because he is now part of the controversy himself. So yesterday, one of their other MPs, Sarah Porchin, who's the latest Reform MP, she asked the Prime Minister and Prime Minister's questions whether he would ban the burqa. Now, he said he wouldn't follow her down that path, but Zia Youssef commented on one of his own members in the party and said that was dumb. These are his own words, and referring to the fact that it wasn't Reform's official policy. So he's stepped out of the breaches there. Now, we don't know if this is one of the reasons why this is kicked off tonight or whether he's resigned because of this, although he has in the past called himself a proud British Muslim patriot. But this is certainly a blow to the party, a party that seems to not be able to get away from a scandal.
And as you say, you know, we're kind of trying to piece together a reason for it. It could be I mean, is it too far to call it a spat? Maybe it is, that with the new MP. All we have is what he's posted on X, right?
Yes. So he said today, 11 months ago, I became chair of Reform. I've worked full-time as a volunteer to take the party from 14 to 30%, quadrupled its membership and delivered historic electoral results. But this is the really scathing part of it. He says, I no longer believe working to get a Reform government elected is a good use of my time and hereby resign the office. Now, I think this is a burgeoning party that is trying to make hay of the fact that it's growing and doing so well. So predicting its future as saying it's not worth my time, I think is quite damning for an insider.
And we have something from Nigel Farage, I think, as well, don't we? Nigel Farage tweeting to say, I'm genuinely sorry that Zia Youssef has decided to stand down as Reform UK chairman. As I said just last week, he was a huge factor in our success on May the 1st and is an enormously talented person. Politics can be a highly pressured and difficult game, and Zia has clearly had enough. He's a loss to us and public life. So as you were saying, clearly warm between them, but we're trying to kind of work out what's gone on. So in our quest to do that, we can bring in our duo for the evening as well, the journalist and broadcaster Daisy Mcandrew and the former Labour Minister Caroline Flint. Daisy, what do you think's gone on?
I mean, there are lots of different rumours swirling around Westminster. Some people saying there's clearly been a clash between Nigel Farage and his sort of protege, #1 fan boy in Zia Youssef. Other people been messaging me in the last few minutes saying that's absolute rubbish. It wasn't Nigel Farage being too big of an ego and not wanting to give Zia Youssef some of the spotlight, which is what some had been intimated. As you've both been saying, there was this burqa spat from PMQs yesterday, which clearly put him in a difficult position, as well as the MP in question, as you said, Serena, promoting something that isn't reform policy. That's awkward. Zia Youssef has been put in charge of the Doge, as in being Nigel's Elon Musk figure to go into councils and cut out all the waste. And again, some people saying this was a bit of a sideline and that he was being sidelined away from Reform HQ and being into a sort of a job cutting waste from local councils, and that somebody who Nigel Farage had taken more into the bosom of the party, Aaron Lobo, who'd come from GB News, that he was being positioned to be the new Zia Youssef. So there are all...
Oh my God, it's like ferrets in a sack, isn't it, for goodness sake?
Or a soap opera.
I mean, I can't believe that the question the new MP asked was the main issue. It's probably might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. I have to say, I mean, I thought the question was pretty typical of how selfish some MPs can be in their own bubble, not thinking about the wider thing. And I was thinking about the fact that, you know, whether he was sidelined to do this particular role in terms of local audits around the council, there's no doubt that is a strong push from where they are in a majority on local councils following the local elections, or where they have some control. They are going for, where they have power and influence, these audits. And in some ways, the audit issue of local authorities, whether you agree with it or not, does chime with a lot of the public who want to see how money is spent and if it is being spent well. On this issue, I mean, it's interesting, Rupert Lowe, who has also left the party after another argument with Farage, you know, butting heads, is also not very fond of Zia either, and has got his own concerns about him and thinks he should be investigated and all this sort of thing. But it's difficult for them as a party because actually this guy, you know, again, you know, was pretty, on a scale of what you might look at in terms of reform, pretty good doing the media rounds.
Yeah. Yes, he was.
Pretty competent, I would say.
Very credible.
If being, you know, dispassionate about this,
he was
just pretty credible performer.
He just did Trevor Phillips. This is what I mean.
I saw
really
him.
illustrates how quickly this happened.
Yeah.
He was put forward by Reform to do the Trevor Phillips show on Sunday.
I saw it.
So, you know, it's just... I can't keep up.
It is fascinating. And just coming back to the Rupert Lowe issue, it's worth reminding people that Rupert Lowe was the MP who was accused of threatening to physically assault Zia. And that was how that whole issue blew up, that Zia was the alleged victim of this threat of violence. And certainly the party, you know, came down, you know, firmly on Zia's side. So that was very interesting. And as you said, he's very credible, you know, a Muslim guy. He got a lot of racism when he was first promoted into the party. He's a self-made multi-millionaire who, you know, as we know, donated money, but also brought a lot of financial credibility and sort of organisational oomph into the party. So I think it will be a loss.
It's interesting. Serena, just finally, I'm interested to get your take on this, because this isn't the first, you know, as, you know, Caroline and Daisy have been saying, it's not the first time someone's quit Reform and been thrown out Reform. You look at Rupert Lowe, but it didn't seem to make any dent in the poll ratings. Do you think this will have the same impact, or do you think actually, as long as Nigel Farage is in the party, no one really cares who else is there?
Well, I think undoubtedly Nigel Farage in many ways is the party. He's such a big figure. But I think there are two things here, poll ratings and professionalisation. They want to move out of just being a popular party and start winning seats, start being a credible force in British politics. They only have 5 MPs at the moment, and they want to They want to build on that. They want to do what the Lib Dems did last time, use that popularity to actually transform that into seats. And Zia was the man behind that. So they perhaps won't see that loss in the polls, potentially. They're extremely popular party on the up, especially when the Conservative Party aren't doing so well, and that's where they're getting a lot of their ratings for. But I think where it will hurt them is in translating that into a bit of a more credible machine.
Really interesting. Thanks both. Thank you both. Thank you, Serena, very much indeed. Let's turn now to Moscow, because Russia's ambassador to the UK has accused Britain of being involved in last weekend's drone attack carried out by Ukrainian special forces. He was speaking to our lead world presenter, Yada Hakim. Well, we will give you that as soon as it can. These things sometimes happen. Sometimes things just disappear in television when you expect them to play. But we will be bringing you the Yada Hakim interview as soon as we can with the Russian ambassador. I think we can do it now.
It is a very serious escalation. That is why President Putin called yesterday to President Trump, and they discussed it, the necessity. And our hope that we will get a reaction from London as well, because I will tell you, such kind of attack involves, of course, provision of very high technology, so-called geospace data, which is only can be done by those who has it in possession, and this is London and Washington. I don't believe that Americans, that has been denied by President Trump, definitely, but it has not been denied by London. We perfectly know how much London is involved, how deeply British forces are involved in working together with Ukrainian in targeting Crimean Bridge, for instance, targeting other issues, provision of satellite information, not only, but also data that is needed to launch missiles, flight data, so-called. That is why we, of course, expect a certain reaction from London.
You describe what happened at the weekend as a serious escalation, and then on the other hand, you say Ukraine is losing this war. Do you and does Moscow view what happened at the weekend as a humiliation?
No. Well, there are some people who are saying that, of course, there should be more precautions taken on about the airfields, and that is correct.
NATO is looking at upping it to 5%. Is based on the defence review here in this country, they're also obviously trying to meet those targets because one of the major threats they see is from Russia.
Yeah, it is fantastic, and I like it. It is. Your Minister of Defense has said that they have daily threat from Russia in the sea, in the air, and on the earth. I very much would like to see these threats. What does he mean? Does he mean that he also said, your Prime Minister, that the level of life of working people has downgraded because of threat from Russia? What does he mean? Is it a safe passage through La Manche or English Channel or by our ships is diminishing a level of life here in Britain, or something else? This story is as old as the world. When the government is not capable to deal with internal economics and cannot provide for its population the normal conditions of life, then it is trying to find an outside threat and to concentrate on saying, let's point this outside threat. This is damaging our life. So that's it.
Should Western capitals not be preparing themselves, not be upping their defence spending when Russia is saying, if you continue in this way, this will escalate?
So if Europeans decide to spend money for military, as I say, toys or equipment, it is up to them to do it. You shouldn't ask us on it. But as we stated many times, and in our statement of the embassy, we do not represent any threat to Britain at all, neither on the sea, nor in the air, nor on the earth.
Well, Yalda joins me now in the studio. Yalda, what's your kind of reaction to the interview we just saw?
You know, Sophie, I've interviewed the ambassador multiple times, and it feels like each time he ups the rhetoric. And this particular time was quite extraordinary, the accusation he was making. When I asked him about that audacious drone attack that Ukraine launched at the weekend, where we saw 5 bases targeted and bombers, a third of their bombers destroyed, you know, billions of dollars worth of damage to these aircraft that Russia desperately needs and uses against the Ukrainians. First of all, he looked visibly angry about it, but then he was defiant and reiterated Vladimir Putin's threats that there would be a harsh retaliation from the Russians. But what I thought was quite extraordinary was the finger of blame that he pointed on London and said it's the British military that train and back and fund the Ukrainians. We know they've got their fingers all over this, that the Ukrainians don't have the capabilities. We know from the conversation that President Trump has had with Vladimir Putin that Washington had nothing to do with this, and this is all London and the British military.
The whole thing I find, if you take a step back, extraordinary. Because if you talk to military chiefs, they say that we are effectively at war at Russia. They've just accused London, as you said in your interview, is somehow being involved in these attacks on Russia. And yet here the ambassador is giving an interview to you in London. It's kind of surreal, the whole situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I asked him about the defence review and also NATO talking about upping their defence spending to 5%. And he said, look, that's their business. But the fact that they see us as a major threat, they're wrong about that. This is a regional and local conflict, and you guys are deliberately trying to turn this into World War III, and that's what we should be avoiding. And I said, look, that sounds like threatening language. When you talk about World War III, when you talk about this escalating beyond the borders of Ukraine. He said, absolutely not. It's you and your governments doing this. And I am just telling you guys that you are now positioning yourselves when you strike deep into Russian territory. This is the position you're putting us in. And I wasn't sure if he was talking directly to a Russian domestic audience as well, to galvanize support, to portray the West as the aggressors, and so justifying their ongoing military operations and saying that Ukraine is not taking peace talks seriously.
A fascinating interview, really interesting, and some of those lines, the news lines that you got out of it as well. Yalda, thank you very much indeed. Yalda Hakim there, Lead World News presenter. Well, of course, we could watch the full interview for that on Yalda's programme, and of course it will also, I'm sure, feature in some of tomorrow's newspapers as well. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the political commentator Tim Montgomery and the Belfast Telegraph columnist Alison Morris. Well, defence has clearly been the story of the week, with the government here under pressure to fund a massive increase in military spending to 3.5% of GDP. But as soon as we start to get our heads around 3.5%, the US called for 5% of GDP on defence. And tonight, NATO's Secretary-General said there's now broad support for that goal. But is it even close to affordable? Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons has been catching up with the US Secretary of Defence Pete Hegseth at the NATO summit in Brussels.
Mr. Hegseth, the United States presently spends 3.4% of its GDP on defence. You're telling everyone else to spend 5%.
I don't think anyone's calling into question the United States of America's investment on defense, especially when it pertains to NATO, the investments that we've made there, the spending we've made in Ukraine. The issue is not whether America will step up. We've stepped up. President Trump's spending $1 trillion in the next budget, proposing 13% increase. Historic investments in our southern border, Golden Dome, advanced technologies, F-47. We're leading the way. The question is, will our allies step up the way we need them to? Because considering the threats in the world today, they have to. We all have to live in history together.
What if they don't?
It's not over.
What if they don't? Would you ever consider withdrawing the United States from NATO?
That's not what we're here to discuss. What we're here to discuss is that NATO countries, when we heard that in there, it was actually very heartening to listen to all the countries step up and say, we hear you, we all need increased capabilities, we all need to spend more. Thank you, President Trump, for reviving this alliance. It was an alliance that was sleepwalking to irrelevance. And President Trump, in his first term, said you need to step up and spend more. And he has in this term done the same. And what I saw in there were countries prepared to step up to push the limits of what they can do. That's a good thing. That's friends helping friends.
Lots of defence, lots of foreign news, but I just want to talk about a domestic news story for a moment, because there's a long tradition of impartiality for journalists, and it's something that I personally believe in and take very seriously. But it is also fair and right that for every one of us, there are also issues we care about more deeply than others. You know, things we feel strongly about, things that make us want to get out of bed in the morning. And for me, the one area that I probably care about more than any other is education, because everything starts with education. In my view, it's the key to a better society. And historically, it's been the defining mission of Labour governments.
Ask me my 3 main priorities for government, and I tell you, education, education, and education.
For Tony Blair, education was central. It was the backbone of his belief in social mobility. And for Gordon Brown, it was the route out of child poverty, a cause that continues to define his politics.
And because child poverty demeans Britain, we have committed our party to tackle and to end it. The measures we have taken this year alone will help lift 250,000 children out of poverty. The economic times are tough, of course. That makes things harder. But we are in this for the long haul, the complete elimination of child poverty by 2020.
But what about today's Labour government? Because I'll be honest, I am a bit confused by their education policy. Blair's reforms were clear: academies, capping class sizes, encouraging more people to go to university. What are Keir Starmer's priorities? We know about expanding breakfast clubs and free school meals. Welcome, meaningful, but not a revolution. We know about charging VAT on private schools to give the money to state schools, but I'm not clear how he wants to improve them. What's the vision? Is it universities or apprenticeships, social mobility or universalism? At a time when the economy and defence, rightly and understandably, are taking up the political bandwidth, there is a risk that education is falling off the priority list. Well, I've been speaking to the Education Minister about some of these issues. That's Stephen Morgan. Thank you very much for being on the programme. So you're expanding free school meals. What's the big idea?
So child poverty is such a scar on our society, and being a mission-driven government, we want to drive that down. So what we've announced is a really significant investment to make sure that children are eligible for free school meal if their parents are in receipt of universal credit. That's going to lift 100,000 children out of poverty, and also make sure that over 500,000 children will be able to access it from September next year. Part of a package of things that, as you know, we are doing as part of our plan for change to make sure that every child gets the best start in life.
So you're talking about child poverty being a scar on society and how this would help that. I guess my question, if it is so important, then why is this not coming in until September 2026? 15 months seems like a long time to wait.
So obviously we'll be setting out an ambitious child poverty strategy later this year, as I said in the House earlier today, and Bridget Phillipson's obviously set out some of the other measures that we are taking in terms of breakfast clubs, our rollout of child care entitlements.
Because you've said how important it is.
No, you're absolutely right, and we've got to get this right, and obviously some of this change is significant, and therefore we've got to work with schools and early years settings that are eligible, and indeed further education settings.
So it's like it's a logistical thing rather than a money thing.
It's just a practical reason.
It's the practical, getting the, making sure they've got a catering company in place and all that kind of stuff.
Significant uplift in the number of children that will be eligible. We've got to get it right, and that's why we want to work with the sector to make it as successful as possible.
You've talked about child poverty, saying that this would lift 100,000 out of poverty. Gordon Brown, someone who's obviously talked a lot about this, has welcomed it, which I'm sure you're happy about. I visited a food bank with Gordon Brown a couple of weeks ago, and the one thing that he was talking about when it comes to child poverty was the 2-child benefit cap. He said it's discriminatory, it's unfair. If you're worried about child poverty, isn't that what you need to be targeting?
Well, we've been listening really carefully to what stakeholders have told us. We've had a whole series of discussions, really helpful discussions, in that child poverty task force that Bridget and Liz Kendall lead on. That will conclude later this year. I want to make sure we're using all the levers of government to reduce child poverty. That includes measures on housing, on the measures that I am responsible for around childcare and schools.
I understand what you're saying about waiting for the review to come in, for the task force to report back. But you say say this would lift 100,000 out of child poverty, but, you know, campaigners say that the two-child benefit cap would lift 350,000 children out of poverty. You know, that is the thing you should be in a rush for, isn't it?
Well, we will set out more details in due course. I've heard loud and clear that message.
I've heard that one before.
But obviously, you know, we want to make sure it's really ambitious and it's a costed proposal and we get it right, and that's why we'll be setting out more details as soon as we possibly can.
It does sound like it's something you're looking at, though, that it's going to change.
Yeah, absolutely, and Bridget's already set that out, I think, in media today.
So we are, of course, awaiting the spending review next week. Education is what's known as an unprotected area, so it could face cuts. Are you worried?
I'm really proud of what we've already done on education. For my brief of early education, £8 billion will be spent later this year on early education to make sure that every child gets the best start in life. Rolling out breakfast clubs to every primary school, 30 million announced at budget last year. The school funding support that we're giving on buildings is making a big difference to children's lives. What we've announced today is £1 billion of extra funding.
I feel like you're answering a different question. You're saying, you know, how proud are you of the things you've done already in education? My question is, are you worried about cuts in the spending review?
I mean, on my brief, there's lots of things we're already doing and we're getting on and delivering those. We're prioritising early years in our existing education budgets, and that's going to make sure that hundreds of thousands of more children benefit from early education at the start of their life.
The question is, you're worried about cuts in the spending review?
I'm focused on delivering for our country. We've been talking closely with Treasury colleagues to make sure we've got the money that we need to deliver our ambitions to improve life chances for every child.
Do you know what's in it? Or are you know, just
You have to wait till next Wednesday, I'm afraid.
I know I do, unfortunately. I'd love it if I could, you know, get the link today. But do you actually know, or is it all kind of kept under wraps? You don't have to tell me, but do you actually know what's in it?
Obviously, I've fed into the process, and
Yeah.
obviously things are being finalised. Really looking forward to hearing the Chancellor of the Exchequer announcing what's in it next week.
But genuinely, I'm actually quite curious. Do you know before, is in the department?
Of course,
or do
I
you
know some
actually
of the things that we've put forward, yeah. But obviously, I will wait and see what the Chancellor has to say when she sat down next Wednesday.
We said that education is you know, an unprotected area. You know, Labour has like a proud record of prioritising education. You know, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown. Really, it feels like, you know, this was the priority for them above all else. What does it say about this current Labour government that education isn't a protected department?
Well, we're a child-centred government and we're putting education back at the heart of national life, and that's
so
why...
Is it, but it's not a protected department. You can understand the point that I'm making, right?
But what I want to make is the point that actually we're introducing breakfast clubs to every primary school in our country. We're improving mental health support in every school. We're rolling out 30 hours of funded childcare a week for eligible parents.
I really don't want to, you know, negate these things which are important. But if you look at the amount of oxygen that defence spending, for example, has taken, it would be very easy to think that, you know, everyone's talking about defence spending. You know, we know that NHS is a protected department. Where's education in this?
We've put extra money into school buildings, as we announced at budget last year. We've increased school pupil premium funding by £3 billion last year as well. The money is going in. But,
the IFS says that there could be a 20% cut across things like adult education.
I mean, we're putting money in, you know, we're setting out what our priorities are. More announcements will come out next week in the spending review.
They also say apprenticeships are under intense pressure. I mean, when Beth Rigby spoke to the Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, this week, he said that Labour hasn't spoken properly to people who want alternatives to the university route. And you've been a party that previously has only cared about the university route. What would you say to that?
Well, we can't fix everything overnight. We've not even been in power a year. I've already set out some of the things we've already delivered. Today, what we've announced is urgent action to bring down child poverty. That's absolutely the right thing to do. But we've got, you know, more years in Parliament, and I hope we can get on and deliver those things to bring about the change that we need.
My interview there with Stephen Morgan coming up after the break. We are going to be getting thoughts of Daisy and Caroline on that interview in just a moment, so do stay with us. Lots to talk about.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. Now, before the break, I was speaking to the Education Minister, Stephen Morgan, about the pressure on his department ahead of all that important spending review next week. So I thought we could have a quick chat now with our duo, Daisy Mcandrew and Caroline Flint, about that. What's your take on all this, Caroline, on education and whether this government's getting it right?
Look, I've got nothing against breakfast clubs, and I think there's undoubtedly the free school meals proposal, although it won't come in until 2026, will make a huge difference to lots of families. You know, if you've got two or three children, it's a lot of money to find for school dinners. So I welcome all that. But I do think we need to hear a little bit more about, you know, the strategic vision for education in raising attainment. One of the other things that we did under the Blair government was have the literacy hour and the numeracy hour, and we got a lot of pushback on that at the time, saying why we're interfering. But it was actually to focus on the building blocks that young children need to have as they make their progress through their school years. And we have got, it's a national disgrace that we have got thousands and thousands and thousands of children who are missing substantial school each and every week. We know that actually, whilst for some the attainment level has shot up with 13 A stars and all this sort of thing, there's still a lot of kids who are not getting what they need after what, let's be honest about it, from the age to 3 to the age to 18, that's 15 years practically of compulsory education. It's just not good enough. So I want to hear more about what we're going to do to make sure that schools work for all kids. And meals are one thing, but getting the building blocks right and the attainment and achievement in the standards they need to have a good working, productive life is key.
But the problem with that is it takes much longer. You know,
It does.
we talk so often about short-termism and long-termism with politics, and how very often it's too tempting for politicians to reach for a short-term fix that will get immediate results. Plus the fact that we still have cost of living crisis. A lot of people are struggling with their bills. So this is attractive to those people who are, you know, kids are going hungry and food is very expensive, so you can see. But as you said, this isn't any answer to education. This is about hungry kids. We know that hungry kids do worse at school, but it's not tackling any deep-seated problems. And one of the reasons for that is because, although it might not be brilliant, our education system is functioning. If you look across or up and down Whitehall, the courts aren't functioning, the prisons aren't functioning, local government isn't functioning, they're all going bust, immigration isn't functioning. There are so many things that are actually, they're not cracking, they're cracked. They're not working at all. So it's easy to see why education is not going to get the priority that perhaps all three of us would like to see it get.
Yeah, I mean, it is an investment in growth. I mean, you're right, it's not going to happen overnight.
Of course.
But I think there needs to be a sense of where we need to get to coming from the government in terms of attainment for our children, and some sense and vision of how we're going to get there. And there are some things that they could be addressing, I think, you know, right now in terms of looking at how we spend our money, how we teach, how we provide for our children. And really, I suppose, knowing what the government's expectations are for our children as they sort of spend their way through their childhood, early childhood into teenhood, to get the best and reach their potential.
And I guess, you know, with education as well, and I actually completely agree with your point about how it's not broken in the same way that other places you look at, they're like on the knees.
It's not in as much of a crisis.
Not crisis.
Yeah.
But it feels to me like it's an important part of the story that politicians tell. And, you know, we saw that with the previous Labour government. We saw that, you know, with people like Michael Gove as well. And if you want to bring people with you, particularly through difficult times, you need to tell a story about something, right?
Yes. Yes, I just think at the moment there isn't, you know, that cliche bandwidth. There isn't political bandwidth to come up with some really clever ideas, apart from breakfast clubs or free school meals, because it's an easier sell and it doesn't take as much sort of concentration and planning and long-termism.
Yeah, really interesting chat. Thanks both very much indeed. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, the Shadow Chancellor distances the Conservatives from the record of Liz Truss and insists his party has learned from their mistakes. The former PM has hit back. Welcome back. Well, it feels like the language coming out of the government about the situation in Gaza has been getting stronger over the last week. And tonight we heard perhaps the strongest yet from the most senior cabinet member yet. Here's what the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said this evening when he was asked whether what is happening meets the bar for genocide.
Well, the question of whether it meets the bar for genocide is a question for international courts to weigh up. So whether or not it meets the legal bar, frankly, I'm not qualified to judge. Whether or not we use that term and whether or not the courts make that judgment doesn't alter the fact that we can see with our own eyes that innocent children are dying in great numbers. They are either starving or they are being bombed. And it's not just children, it's other innocent civilians, it's civilian infrastructure. What happened in terms of the abduction of Israeli hostages on that appalling day, it was barbaric and we condemn it, but it's no justification for what we are seeing now inflicted on innocent people in Gaza. And that's why the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary are working intensively with international allies to try and bring an end to this, the return of the hostages, the ceasefire we want to see, and crucially, the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. And believe me, those of us who are in positions of power in government feel the same frustration as the people who are out marching on the streets, because we want to see an end to this conflict. We want to see peace for Israelis and for Palestinians, and we want to see justice and statehood for the Palestinian people.
Let's bring in Daisy and Caroline, shall we? I mean, you can see the change in what the government's saying and the frustration, I guess, too.
Yeah, I think the frustration came over really clearly, because obviously this isn't his brief, it's not his area, but this wasn't an unprepared answer. It wasn't an ill-prepared answer. It seemed to me quite deliberate, although he did have a bit of that bunny in the headlights look, because everybody knows when you're talking about this subject, it is so dangerous to get it wrong, to get the wordings wrong. You can get into such trouble, veering into territory that you shouldn't, or you're going to get criticised for. So I had some sympathy. I think he did look, I thought he looked tense, but he clearly wanted to go further, which is very, very interesting. But of course, you've got two audiences here. You've got the Labour supporters who clearly want the Labour leadership to go much further than they currently have. And then you've got international diplomacy, which is a completely different audience.
No, I think that's right. And of course, today, a UN resolution didn't get passed seeking a ceasefire, and Britain voted for it. America was the only country that didn't, in terms of, I think, the 14 in the Security Council. Things are becoming ever more concerning, I think. And I mean that deeply. I mean, the truth is that we are seeing the madness of the shutting down of the potential food. I think I heard the other day that at one point there were 400 food collection points, and the reason for that, to make it as easy as possible for families to be able to get to those points, get food and come back. It's gone down to about a handful, and people are having to walk sometimes 15 kilometres to get there. Now, the argument about Hamas being involved and who's killed who's killed. The truth is, when you have an incredibly large number of people trying to get to food when they are starving, whether or not a shot's fired, people are going to get hurt in that crush. They are desperate. And this has been caused partly by, obviously, Netanyahu and their refusal to cooperate with other food agencies to get food to those families and those people.
And what's the mood on the Labour benches about the way the Labour front bench is handling this?
Well, I think, obviously, we have different groups within the sort of Labour backbenches. And as we know, we had a number of people who former Labour stand as independent candidates at the last election on the issue of Gaza and Israel, and some of those people got elected. Again, I think there is a proportion of people who have always been maybe sort of pro-Palestinian point of view, and maybe not seeing the Israeli point of view very much. But I think even more probably moderate MPs who are, want to see a two-state solution, as was outlined, have defended Israel as a democracy within that region, have found the actions, and I think it's the actions of Netanyahu and his government, just becoming intolerable.
It's interesting to hear Wes Streeting speak of that when, of course, he was run so close in his own constituency as well.
Yes. And there's pressures in those constituencies for MPs like Wes as well.
Thanks both very much indeed. Now, for the Conservatives, Liz Truss's mini-budget is an episode in the party's history they would probably quite like to forget. But today, the Shadow Chancellor was attempting to distance the Conservatives even further from the events of 2022. He was taking swipes at both Labour and Reform, but Mel Stride also insisted his party had learned from their mistakes.
My party cannot begin to win back the public's trust until we have shown we understand their disappointment and their anger, and show that we have changed. The clearest example of that, in the minds of many, is what happened in the autumn of 2022. For a few weeks, we put at risk the very stability which Conservatives has always said must be carefully protected.
Well, Liz Truss herself had this to say in response. She posted on X. In attacking the mini-budget, Mel Stride sides with the failed Treasury orthodoxy. Stride is a creature of the system. When he served alongside me as Treasury Minister, he always went along with officials, including on the loan charge and IR35, damaging the self-employed and SMEs. He backed Sunak's huge spending, but not my tax cuts, which were smaller in size and would have increased growth. Britain's system of government is broken. Nothing will change with people like him in charge. Blimey, let's bring in Daisy and Caroline once again. I mean,
fight, fight, fight.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the same party. You kind of have to remind yourself almost. Caroline, things are not looking good.
No, and I think, you know, what's interesting, Mel Stride, they think he used the word, you know, we want to show contrition or something. I mean, he could just say sorry. I mean, he was, you know, a key player, you know, in the 4 years from 2019 to 2024. Chris Philp, the current Shadow Home Secretary, was actually Chief Secretary to Treasury when the mini-budget came in under Truss's premiership. I mean, they've got a lot to answer for in the Tory party, both in their parliamentary Labour Party, but in their wider membership, about how they ended up voting for Liz Truss.
And I understand, you know, the point you're making about, you know, the fact that he was in the you know, the cabinet or whatever, but you know, he was a different wing from the mini-budget. It's fair to say, isn't it? He was on the kind of Rishi Sunak side of the party when they were talking about fancy economics, right?
And it's a very difficult, it's a sticky wicket for the Tories and has been ever since the mini-budget, because of course every time anybody on the Labour benches you know, is criticised by the Conservatives, they'll just say, yeah, well, you're the party of the mini-budget. You're the party that almost brought the economy down. So they have to somehow slay that dragon. They've got to exercise that ghost or whatever analogy you want to do. And so this was sort of first step of saying it wasn't us, it was her. Yep. It was Liz Truss. She's nothing to do with us. But of course, anything that involves Liz Truss is one of those get the popcorn moments because you know she's going to come out fighting, and it is very difficult. And of course, you know, the Labour can say always, you know, you're the party of Liz Truss. But by Mel Stride reminding everybody about Liz Truss and bringing her out of the woodwork, again, he's doing the same thing. He's reminding everybody what happened.
I get that. And, you know, any incoming government using that line against the previous government at some point, and they've obviously felt it already, Labour, is people going to say, yeah, OK, fine, but what are you going to do? That's going to be the issue. But I do think that when you look at the whole of Mel Stride's speech, given that first opening gambit, he then went on to say pretty much nothing. He just attacked Labour for its spending and what have you, but then didn't come up with any particular ideas about what their answer would be. In fact, they did he talked about radicalising politics, and I think they're going to have two commissions. So if that's radicalising politics, I don't know. But again, even under Rishi Sunak, though, in the lead up to, well, you know, we didn't then know it was going to be in July 2024, the election, but in that last year, they were still spending money, an awful lot of money along the way, which obviously led to, you know, in some ways it justified the critique of the incoming Labour government about leaving a massive black hole in finances.
It's interesting because a lot of Tories are saying this is sort of like when Liam Byrne left the note saying we've run out of money. It's one of those where it can be thrown back in the face, and it was constantly thrown back in the face, you know, to the Labour Party. And it's a sort of similar thing. Liz Truss is thrown in the face of the Conservatives. But I mean, she was that video that she did with the whiskey boxer 3 days ago with a guy who's been in prison for beating people up, and it's like she doesn't seem to ever. She's the one that never seems.
She doesn't
to
read the
learn
room really. Well,
she
the room
doesn't read
she's
the
in
room.
probably very small with people saying she's wonderful and here have another whiskey, but she's not reading the wider room of how people feel.
And she still can't. She won't and can't admit that she did anything wrong because she is a free marketeer. She can't say, I'm a free marketeer, but the market turned on me. So she has to say that Mel Stride turned on me, or the establishment, or Whitehall, or civil servants, or somebody, not me, Gov. It was somebody else putting the boot in. But she can't say it was the market because
Mel
that's
Stride's
who she
fault,
believes.
isn't it? That's
Exactly. Mel Stride's
He's
fault
part of the Treasury Orthodoxy.
for being part of the Orthodoxy and not going along with her plans.
But he does have a line in his speech about challenging the orthodoxy, the economic orthodoxy. So on one level, he's using some of her language. The problem is we don't quite know what he means by challenging the orthodoxy.
But a lot of Labour politicians talk about, Treasury orthodoxy as in poo-pooing it and saying it's a problem. It's not that controversial to say that's an issue, but where the buck ultimately lies is the issue.
Thanks both. Really interesting chat there. Still to come on the Politics Hub. After the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown praises Marcus Rashford for his push for free school meals, we'll be taking a look at how much a famous face can turn the tide in a campaign for a political cause.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, 2 teenagers are sentenced over the manslaughter of an 80-year-old man brutally attacked whilst walking his dog near Leicester. Warnings from the health regulator over a potential baby boom as weight loss drugs could be affecting the reliability of the contraceptive pill. Plus, Beyoncé brings her cowboy boots to Tottenham as the UK leg of her new tour gets underway. All that and much more on the UK Tonight from 8.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first. Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, earlier we were, of course, talking about the government's expansion of free school meals. And I think if there's anyone who's synonymous with the campaign on this, it's Marcus Rashford. And the former PM, Gordon Brown, clearly thinks so too. He thanked the footballer for his work today, which got us thinking, over the years, there's been a lot of political causes that famous faces have backed in an attempt to help turn the tide.
We aren't going to end knife crime. We can't. We can tackle the attributes towards it.
Something like not eating every day, or not eating the right amount of meals every day. It can have an impact on your life.
I stand here today not as a survivor, but as an advocate, a campaigner, an agent of change, and a supporter of Women's Refuge.
If the government ends farming, which is seemingly what it wants to do, where do we get our food from?
Yeah. Well,
Well, let's bring in now a duo for the evening, shall we? Again, Daisy and Caroline. I mean, it can really make a difference, can't it?
It can. I was waiting to see Jamie Oliver. That's the one that always...
Well, he's got one every other week, hasn't he?
Well, that's
for the last 20 years.
But the whole Turkey Twizzlers, you know, did make a huge difference and made people think about the quality. Going back to school meals, made people think about the quality of them. Joanna Lumley, of course. What you want is a national treasure, don't you? You don't want somebody that's going to be divisive at all, because you don't want to annoy half the people. So sometimes a footballer can be difficult because they can be quite divisive. Rushford, clearly not. I mean, I would like to see people... I host a podcast, I mean, who doesn't? But it's specifically about sort of people... You're too young, people our age who have elderly parents who are looking after elderly parents. It's called Age and Stage, and it's sort of giving advice. And that's one of those issues that is so unsexy, but needs, but affects millions and millions of people, particularly those with teenagers and elderly parents. And how do you navigate the system? I would love to see, I don't know, Joanna Lumley or somebody, come get involved in that area.
If you're watching Joanna Lumley, get on the podcast. I love it. What about you, Caroline? You've got a particular...
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, I'd love to campaign, stop changing the clocks.
Oh,
my Lord.
No, I'm with you on
Stop changing. I mean, it's not
I'll
even...
back you that.
It's not even been around that long. I mean, it's not even 200 years. This changing the clock... If you want... Here's one for you, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. If you want to think about growth in the economy, stop changing the clocks, because it has an impact on,
You'll lose votes north of the border.
You won't lose any votes north of it. This
so?
idea, look, farmers up there in the north of England, they're all used, they've all got the cows in sheds with, big lights, lamps shining. They don't, this idea of they're out ploughing the fields
I thought it was
and things
children going to school in the
No,
dark.
I honestly think, it is ridiculous in so many ways. So that's one way. I put fluoride in the water. Basically, if you want to deal with tooth decay, get the fluoride in the water.
Who are your celebs supporting this?
Who are my celebs supporting this?
Who's synonymous with time?
Time. Oh God, I'll have to come back.
Well, we all want David Beckham. We can have David Beckham changing the hour.
Well, he does advertise a lot of watches.
That's what made me.
I mean, watches that usually a
That's a good one.
I don't know, sort of like 10 years' wages for the average person. So maybe he could be quite on that. But things that get annoying like that. I mean. I mean, there's more serious ones, but I've got my, my room 101 where I put certain things,
I think the clock is a good one, I have to say. I'm always slightly intrigued by the fact that, celebrities for specific campaigns goes down well. Celebrities telling people how to vote.
Oh, absolutely.
Get people
and also
go down like a lead balloon.
And there's been great campaigns of Marcus Rashford, but there is also sometimes a bit with some celebrities when they've done something really wrong and their agent or someone is, we've got to rebrand you. We've got to rebrand you. Let's give you a cause. Let's give you a cause. It's the redemption song.
True.
It's
we're out of time, but thanks both very much indeed for being on the programme today. That is it from us this week. I'll see you Monday at 7. Up next, it's UK Tonight with Sarah Jane.